Welcome to episode 6 of One-on-One Mobility Conversations. Michael, welcome to the podcast. I'm really excited to see you again. I know it's been a while and looking forward to catching up. And I think we're going to talk about potatoes too, Michael. So I'm going to warn you, we have to talk about potatoes. But
We may have to do that. Sounds great. Well, it's good to be here. And yeah, thanks for having me. It has been a little while, but it's good to see you again. Unfortunately, not in person, but I will take virtually.
Well, Michael, you were a huge hit at our conference back in February. Really nailed it. I had personal notes from so many franchise owners that you made them think hard actually about changing their life, how they viewed their business. And then, the qualitative side of things, the survey was outstanding. You actually scored higher than I did on the presentation. So I'm not going to hold that against you here on our chat, but I thought you were perfect subject matter and topic for where we are as a company.
Awesome. Well, it's good. You had such a great group. I remember some of the conversations I had with people from all different backgrounds, and had different stories and ways of, I guess, interpreting my topics that I talked about. After the talk, I hung around, chatted with people, and it's like people kind of pull their own nuggets from it and they apply it to their own experience in life. And that's always the most fun part for me, is hearing people sort of interpret what I'm saying in a way that really works for them and can benefit them.
Yeah, I think the one comment I got from our franchise owner up in Portland, Maine, and he's a very structured guy, just an excellent operator and someone I've grown close to. He took away from the book and the presentation that it's like he's just opening your mind to finding better ways to operate your personal life. Like it's a constant, you have to continue to evolve. And he applied it to his business. And I was up there to meet him and his uncle-in-law who helps him with the business. And they were reinventing how they're going to go to market. And he was quoting out of Comfort Crisis on this. He was actually saying, and I've got to be uncomfortable in this decision of what we're going to do. And it was sort of fun. So your ears were probably burning a couple of months ago.
That's awesome. Well, I do think that, when you find something that works business-wise, it's easy to get comfortable there. And you just assume that this is the best course of action. But I think that sometimes searching for, how could we do this better? How can we keep sort of shaving off the edges? And while that's more work, it's a little more uncomfortable. And especially when you identify the changes you have to make, that can be hard, but that just sort of constant course correcting can do a ton of good. And it's not, it's not that you always want to be blowing things up, because that's just chaos. But you never want to get too comfortable in whatever approach you're taking. You always want to kind of be looking for ways you can improve, and also realize that markets change, people's preferences change, technology changes a lot of things, and to always kind of be asking how you can align to reach your goals.
Yeah, one thing about Comfort Crisis too was just walking away from routines. The rucksacking has changed me. I used to be a rigid run, lift, cycle, and I did all this, and I always felt like I had to be completely out of breath or completely exhausted to be able to say, hey, I'm benefiting from a workout. But rucking has changed it. Like I now put that in. I do it 3 or 4 days a week, and I'm finding two things. One, I'm exhausted afterwards, but I'm not the same as running 3 miles at a pace. And to be honest with you, I don't do it with anything in my ear, so I've got 2 hours of just thinking, which was the other takeaway from Comfort Crisis, which was just turning everything off. My head explodes because I've got nothing to do but sweat and think. And so I've broken a workout routine that was probably in place for 10 years, and it's working.
Yeah, well, I'll say I could say a lot of things about that, but I'll try and keep it brief. I'll say 3 things. One is that I think when you look at how people exercise today, it's that we kind of have 2 modes. We have our normal life mode, which is very sedentary. And then we have exercise mode, which is, 30, 60 minutes. And we go super hard during that time. But the human body evolved to really go at different speeds, right? And we seem to do best going sort of slowly but steadily across the landscape. That is to say, walking and carrying. And so I think that inserting that back into your life can really have a lot of benefits in terms of physical health, but also mental health, because I do think there's something about the speed of walking that can be really good for thought. The second part is that carrying is the number one thing that humans are good at. Like, we're the only species that can pick something up and carry it for distance. And that really, it changes our bodies in a way that's really beneficial for our long-term health. And then finally, I love the fact that you said you do it without your phone and just allow your mind to wander, because we spend so much time on digital media today. It's like 12 to 13 hours a day. And, I'm not, sometimes people think that I'm like anti-technology. I'm not anti-technology at all. But I am asking, does 13 hours seem like a lot of time to you? Because it does to me. And so I think that if you have times where you can remove yourself from that, your brain has to figure something else out to do. And oftentimes those things, the places that it goes are often new, more creative, more imaginative, and those can lead to better outcomes in the long term than if you were to just have blasted music 2 hours or done whatever for 2 hours.
I changed my workday, Michael. I used to listen to podcasts or talk radio in the office, and I don't. People laugh at me because they come by my office. There's no music. There's nothing, and I don't. There's no distraction. I have to concentrate. I'm a little bit ADD, so that helps. But the other thing is, I don't do any social media or any non-work in activities on my phone while I'm at the office. Period. Because there's another part to that too. It helps you focus, but we enter into our lives, and you know this better than anybody in your studies, that I have to make a decision. And when you're on Facebook, you're faced with hundreds of opportunities that you have to make a decision. I have to like this. I have to respond to it. And it's just wasted productivity. Like, I don't need those decisions. They mean nothing in the grand scheme, especially at work. And I've just completely shut it down. It's like a vault in here. I'm not very excited to be in because I don't have topics to talk about because I'm probably 8 hours behind on the news, but I'm far more productive than I was before reading your book.
Yeah, I think that a lot of the tech, and especially around social media and news, it can break up our day in a way that feels productive, but actually isn't at all. If you look at kind of what is the bigger goal, um, it's not. And I'm not saying that people shouldn't use it or anything, but I do think figuring out how do you use it, how do you chunk it up, where it's just like maybe you have, very end of the day, you're like 10 minutes where I do my social media stuff that I think probably pushes the business forward, but really it's not pushing the business as far forward as all these other things that I spent my 7 hours and 50 minutes working on during the day. And so kind of figuring out that relationship, because I do think that when people face, whether it be boredom or frustration or a task gets hard, the reaction is, let's find something easy and relieving that relieves our stress. And guess what? Social media and your phone and Twitter and the news, it is designed to give you that relief, to sort of take your mind out of bored frustration mode. And that often is at odds with what you actually need to do to produce good work. Like, doing good work is never easy. If it were easy, everyone would do it, right? It's like
Right.
you really have to sit with that. Oh man, this sucks. This is hard. I have to think on this, but eventually on the other side, you come up with some good ideas.
You mentioned rucking and walking. I'd really like to get your take on walking. I know this is big in your family because your wife does about 30,000 steps a day. But the impact on seniors and as we grow older, I didn't pay attention to this before, but after I read the book and everything else, um, my mom is an avid walker, and my mom was not an athlete. She didn't play sport. She was never the workout person. But over the last 10 years, she has embraced walking where it is a routine, habitual every day. And when I go to visit her, she's like, I'm out. And every morning she's out. And my mom is, knock on wood, she's healthy. She's happy. Her mental acuity is fantastic for 83. And how much of walking is part of that, Michael?
I would say it's a huge part of it. It has body benefits, heart health, which so heart disease is the number one killer of people. Huge benefits for heart health, huge brain benefits as well. Also a great stress reliever. And stress, we think about it just frustrates us in the short term, but it's actually linked to a lot of long-term health outcomes. Um, it's probably the best thing you can do for your health in the long term is just like really just try and walk more. try and walk as much as you can. So to kind of go back what I said about exercise, I think kind of the key reason that people run is because we now have designed our lives to be relatively sedentary, and we have less time devoted to physical activity. So our jobs are sitting in a chair rather than being out in the field physically working. And so when we do have time, we go, okay, I need to fit in as much exercise, as much movement as possible. How do you do that? You run, right? Because you can run
Yeah.
3 miles in 30 minutes, where if you were to walk them, now you're at like an hour. So really, we just have to truncate the time for running. But if you look at sort of the big picture, I think that if you can find more time to walk, if you can be willing to devote a little more time, that's probably going to help you over the long run when you look at the sustainability of running and super hard workouts. Like, people tend to get injured, they burn out, but walking is just one of those things. If you can do it every day, um, the long-term outcomes of that are amazing. And you see that all around the world. Like, the cultures who walk the most tend to be the most healthy in the long run. And the story about your mom too, it reminds me of my grandmother's best friend. She walked 5 miles a day, basically every day, and she lives in Denver, and she's 95, and she lives alone because she's totally functional, and she's totally sharp, totally functional, and I really believe it. A lot of it goes back to that walking.
Yeah, and I just like the fact she has a routine. It's almost as if unconsciously she's installed a routine every day that she has to do it, and she's highly organized. But it's just after reading that book, I'm like, that's my mom. And even my wife Angie and I, we have. I never thought I'd be this person, but we walk every morning. We're up at
That's awesome.
5:45 out, and I try to ruck as much as I can in the morning. Then I'll do a longer ruck, but we used to be runners. We would be out there running, but now we're doing 45-minute hour walks instead of running for 30 minutes. And it's just a different but by the way, it's less stressful to do it too. It's like, and you're taking away the competitive, staring at my Garmin, do we shave off, 3 seconds off of our mile, which really, okay, that's great, but it
Mhm.
doesn't matter.
I think it's also really great for connection between people. For all of time, humans basically walked around the earth looking for food. And they would have conversations when they did that. They would plan things, they would connect. And so I really do think it's a good way to connect with your family, with your friends. Just go for a walk with people. My wife and I have the best conversations we have when we're out on long walks. So every Saturday, for example, we'll take like a 12-mile walk together. We'll walk down to this coffee shop that's like 6 miles away. We'll get coffee and then we'll walk home. And it's like, those are the best conversations we have every week.
Yeah, we did the entire Christmas list this morning, so that's all done. Now we
It's
have work,
awesome.
but so one of the things I am going to be talking to my wife about tomorrow in our morning walk is potatoes. And your newsletter this morning, fascinating. I think I learned a couple of things about that. Like, so what's your love affair with the potato?
Okay. So if you were to, I like to say it like this: if you were to pick one natural food to live off of for the rest of your life, potatoes are the best choice. So they have probably the broadest range of vitamins and minerals of any natural food. They also oddly have enough protein to help people meet the protein guidelines from the government. The other thing that I think is more important, because obviously no one's going to listen to this and then try and live off potatoes. I think the important part in the context of today is that um, they're the most filling food per calorie. And that becomes really important in a world where people eat too much food, and probably our number one driver of disease is overweight and obesity. And so by eating potatoes, you tend to get fuller quicker on fewer calories, and therefore you are more likely to not eat way too much and gain weight over the long term. And they also have this like fascinating history of keeping different cultures alive, and like they're just like this wonderful, amazing food that we've totally overlooked. But I will say this too: people often think they're unhealthy, but the reason people think they're unhealthy is because we tend to mess them up, right? We fry them, we slather them in cheese and bacon and insert any other terribly unhealthy thing you could put on something. And so we make them unhealthy. But if you can just kind of simplify them down, great food that like everyone should eat.
But isn't it wild? Like when I was a kid, going through the famous food period, that pyramid that we know that was all not right. that was a carb to avoid for a long time. And I find it funny that it's actually really good for you now.
Oh, totally. Yeah, there's some research that came out that said they have a particular starch that it was basically just a lot of bad research that found people who ate potatoes weighed more. But it goes back to, okay, well, how are you eating them? It's because the people were eating them in the form of French fries, right? And you could like pick any food, broccoli. If I batter it and I fry it and I dip it in ranch dressing, like broccoli is all of a sudden fattening, right? So it's really just the context of how you use it. We can make anything terribly unhealthy, no matter how healthy it is on its own.
I don't know, Michael. Broccoli fried with bacon is kind of hard to avoid. I mean, come on, that's pretty good. So, not to dive into politics at all, but the election has created this attention to nutrition and things at a much higher level, which candidly I'm kind of enjoying. It sounds like we're maybe starting to talk about things that maybe we hadn't talked about in the past. Your initial thoughts on the change in discussion about nutrition and food and what goes in our food?
Yeah, I think it's good that we're talking about it. I mean, people can agree, they can disagree with some of the claims around health that people make, but at least we're talking about it because we haven't for 60 years, 50 years. And I think the outcome of that has not necessarily been a good thing, especially in terms of the food that we eat, how much we move our bodies. So I'm especially excited about conversations around school lunches and what kids eat. Um, I think we need to pair a little more recess on top of that as well. So, like if you think when I was in elementary school, they fed us absolute crap. Not many people were overweight though. Not many kids were overweight. And I think one of the reasons is because we could go have recess for like an hour a day. And so you're running around, you're burning it all off. At the
Exactly.
same time, we probably would have been better off were we not eating pizza with chocolate milk every single day. So I think if we can just start to have those conversations, especially around young people, that's going to be a good thing in the long run.
Yeah, it's funny. I mean, I remember being in elementary school, and I remember being coming back to class just a sweaty mess because we were all playing football, whatever. But when at a previous brand, we worked with No Kid Hungry as a charity, a fantastic organization. And a lot of people mistakenly thought that they were about food banks and donating food, but they were actually much larger. And they had one mission that was the underspend on food programs for kids for breakfast and lunch. It was shocking. And their job was just to help the families understand that, hey, there is a program. And then B, they did things, Michael, like I remember in Baltimore County, the release to sign up your kid for a free lunch or a free breakfast was 6, 7 pages long. And so you have these folks that didn't maybe have the sophistication or the education to understand, like, identification and warranties and a release. And so we worked actually together down to one paragraph. Like, and then all of a sudden, but the impact of food and now the nutrition could really just supercharge a generation of folks that are probably not eating the right things or not eating at all, which is even worse and even sadder
Yeah.
to know.
Yeah, I agree. And I think that sometimes think that when you eat healthier, it's automatically going to be more expensive. And I don't think that's necessarily true, but it does require a little bit of information about which healthy foods are not as expensive. And then it requires time in order to cook it. And time can be a constraint on people.
Yeah, my one last connection to the potato, I know it's gonna be probably the name of this podcast, the potato, but
I
I
like it.
am when I was living in Toledo working with No Kid Hungry, we sponsored in-city farms, and the whole idea was to get kids out of school, and some of these kids were troubled, and they would work the farms, and they would teach them not just nutrition, but how to nurture something and how to follow a process and see a reward. And, I never forget, I met this one kid and we were actually harvesting, potatoes and
Nice.
carrots,
That's awesome.
and he had no idea what a potato was prior. Like, he self-confessed that all he ate was fast food, my family,
Mm.
and the fact that he knew where a potato was and everything else completely Michael, it changed his life. He just
Wow.
like, through nutrition, he found his world exploded, and the way he tended to this farm was, he had, like, 2 lanes, they must have been maybe 20 feet long, but it was his little world, and It was just magical to watch.
That's awesome.
So another good thing about a potato vine.
There you go. There you go.
So, one not to get into so much about your books, and I love the conversation about the general topics, but in Scarcity Brain, one of the things I found fascinating was the whole. I mean, the first part of that book talking about Vegas and slot machines and just the entire how they've become so scientific with data and analytics to increase the fact that you could win more. You don't win in the end, but you just keep on longer. Um, and I love the part when you talked about how companies are using that now that it's not the predictable parties every month. So we adopted here just a random barbecue. Like my VP of operations and I will just go, "Is today a good day to barbecue?" And then we'll just open up the grill. And I'm telling you, they're the best parties we have because they don't expect it. They enjoy it more. It's the middle of the day. Probably half of them are stressed about something, and all of a sudden they get a burger and a beer. And we do potato chips. Back to the potato. I'm like, sorry,
Good.
but we'll have a couple potato chips. But that has been that was one of the many takeaways I took from that book.
Yeah. So people generally, random rewards are exciting, right? And I'll give the analogy of a slot machine because I think slot machines are just this like perfect metaphor to understand human behavior, what excites us, what doesn't excite us. Uh, if a slot machine were to pay you $1 every time you played, you won $1, that might be good, but it wouldn't be exciting. It would be a job, right? That's basically like a position where you're like a factory worker, right? You're just winning this dollar for a repeat behavior every single time. You would get really bored really fast. The random rewards are what make slot machines interesting. It's that you could lose,
Yeah.
you could win a little, or you could win a ton, and you have no idea when that's going to happen. So random rewards really capture people's attention. They get them excited. And I think if employers can figure out how do we use that to fire up our employees, to incentivize them to do better work, and even use that with our clients, I think that can be a good thing. And to your point about the surprise barbecues, that's an awesome example. And that's something that there's a behavioral psychologist, Karen Pryor, who writes about that, just how powerful. If you're going to have a company party, don't tell anyone about it. Like, because all of a sudden when you get the email a week ahead that's like, hey, we're having a company party at noon on Friday, it's like all of a sudden it starts to feel like a work thing.
It's work. Yeah.
Whereas if you just go 11:59, all of a sudden Joe has the whistle, company party, everyone's like, wait, what's going on? And it's this surprise big thing, and it's way more fun for people.
I'm gonna have to add the whistle.
Yeah, add the party whistle.
So what's next? What I love about your books too is you're all over the world. The Baghdad visit and all in the drug epidemic there was fascinating. But I have to say, my favorite line in that whole section was when you were describing the gentleman you were with. Nice suit, crisp white shirt, lots of hair. I really laughed out loud. It was great. But so where's your next project and where is it taking you and what can we expect next?
So I just actually signed a contract for another book, and it's going to be, and of course it'll evolve as I start to write it, but kind of the thinking now is it's sort of a follow-up to the comfort crisis, but more on the aspect of mindset, mental health, resilience, those sort of topics. So more into the mind, whereas comfort crisis was a little more about physicality. And for that, I'm going to do a really long through hike in southern Utah. So it'll be about 45 days. And then I'll probably tack on some other fun excursions to places as they come up. I like to use my books as a way to go see interesting places and meet interesting people.
I was going to say another excuse, go torture yourself because you don't go to very comforting easy to get to places.
Unfortunately, I don't. Yeah, I should really I should write. I should have maybe eventually. I'll write like the discomfort crisis, and I'm just gonna go to like a resort in Cancun for like a month and just eat everything I can and just see what happens. That'll be an eventual book.
My God, if you need help with that book, just let me know. I mean, more than
You're invited.
well, listen, this has been great. I really, I can't thank you enough. You really helped make our conference outstanding, really got people to think. And your books are great. I recommended them. I love reading them. I read Comfort Crisis again. I actually read it this time. First time I listened to it, so I read it, which was fantastic. And I can't wait for the next book. But personally, you've had a big impact on how I look at things and process things, and I appreciate that. And we're 2%ers here, so we all text each other that we didn't take the stairs, or we're all traveling in out of Atlanta. So land at A, got to get to F, walk it, do those
Such
type
a
of
good
things.
walk too. Those Atlanta gates, man, you can get some steps in Atlanta. I'll tell you that.
Exactly. Just got to get that circle on my little iPhone app thing, right? Get the donuts. But
Yep.
this has been great, and I'm really glad we had a chance to catch up. And just wishing you and your family all the best in your next big project.
Yeah. Well, I really appreciate it. It was awesome to talk to your group, and I'm glad we could follow up here. It was always fun chatting with you. So keep in touch. And if anyone has questions for me, always feel free to email or get in touch. I'm easy to find.
Outstanding. Oh, one last thing. So we couldn't get Mike Rowe to speak at my convention this year. The dates didn't work out for some reason. Everything out. So I'm still trying to get on his podcast. Any help you
Next
can
year.
get? 'Cause, yeah.
Next year, you got to book him early. Be like, okay, well, how about next year and the year after and the year after? We'll get him eventually. Just this is like you got to be like the river on the plain that eventually forms the canyon. Just enough time and pressure. Mike Rowe will speak at your conference.
I'll do that. That's what I'm going to quote that the next time I email him for the 50th time. So,
There you go. I like it.
Michael, take care. I really appreciate it.
Yeah, thank you.
That wraps up our time with Michael Easter on 101 Mobility Conversations. We'll catch you on the next episode. Take care.